hybrid hearing on the roles and responsibilities of the Department of Defense IG and the Service Inspectors General. Today we will have two panels. The first panel includes Mr. Gordon Heddell, who served as the Department of Defense IG from 2008 to 2011. He also served as IG for the Department of Labor and has extensive experience in this area. Ms. Mandy Smithberger of the Project on Government Oversight is our second person to testify about considerations for improving the DOD and service IGs. For full disclosure, she was a wonderful member of my staff about 8 years ago, and it's nice to see you again. In the second panel, we will hear testimony from Mr. Sean O'Donnell, Acting DOD IG, and the Military Services IG. While we understand the DOD IG and the service IGs have different roles, responsibility, and authority than other executive agency IGs, I think it's important we examine them closely and make sure that they have the independence, training, staffing, and resources to provide proper oversight. I am concerned about this issue because there has been too many recent examples where the service IGs appear to be asleep at the wheel, lacked independence, and whose responsibilities under service regulations requires confidential advisors of the commander, requires them to be confidential advisors of the commander. From the findings of the FORSCOM IG inspection at Fort Hood that suggested all was fine with the SHARP program there, despite ample evidence that they were not in compliance with the DOD policy, let alone having an effective program, to the lagging investigations into the medical care of Private First Class Delbarba, to the failure of Navy IGs to report sexual harassment allegations against a senior executive to the DOD IG, as they are required to, enabling a serial offender to victimize several more Navy civilian employees and retire with full pension with no accountability, there is mounting evidence of a disturbing trend across the IGs, of which these are just a few examples. Besides the authorities, it's imperative we examine the true independence of the IGs across the department and services. It's unclear to me how someone who works for the commander, who by regulation is supposed to act as the commander's, quote, eyes and ears, unquote, and buy into that commander's leadership philosophy, can also remain impartial when investigating allegations within their own command, especially when those allegations involve retaliation for making a protected disclosure. The last time that the service IGs testified before the subcommittee in 2018, the Army Inspector General made negative comments about whistleblowers, which was stunning to me. If the individuals who are charged with investigating whistleblower reprisal complaints are prejudiced against them to begin with, we have no hope of protecting brave service members and civilians who come forward to protect the American taxpayer and call out wrongdoing. I also think we need to better understand how DOD and the services work together when complaints come in. After all, if a person sends their complaint to the DOD Inspector General hotline, but then the DOD IG passes it to the services to investigate, it seems like we're setting up a false expectation of confidentiality for complainants. Is DOD telling complainants up front that their reports are being shared with the service IGs, who may report to the very commanders who are the subject of the complaint? What is done to protect complainants and ensure a quality investigation that meets a high standard? How is retaliation not the end result, therefore discouraging service members from coming forward? I look forward to digging into these critical set of issues today, and with that, I turn it over to Ranking Member Banks for his opening statement.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also want to welcome our witnesses on both panels. Today's hearing is an important step in building our members' awareness of the role of inspectors general and the role that they play within the Department of Defense and in the services. Oversight is also an important role played by Congress. In fact, one of the first times the House of Representatives investigated the military was in 1792, due to the defeat of General Arthur Sinclair on the Indiana-Ohio border. I figured I would take the opportunity to selfishly work in some Indiana history for all of you. Like the oversight and investigation responsibilities of Congress, all of the inspectors general here today play a vital role in overseeing, investigating, and preventing fraud, waste, and abuse and mismanagement across the department and the services. They have been challenged by investigations, audits, and evaluations that have run the gamut of issues from major acquisition programs to material readiness to issues involving good order and discipline, all requiring Inspector General organizations that are agile and independent. They also require personnel with the requisite training, experiences, and knowledge to get after the issues and provide recommendations that will inform their organizations and Congress. On panel one, I'd like to understand any recommendations that you may have for the Department of Defense and service IGs on improving their training and education. I'm also interested in your thoughts on whether you think independence is an issue for any or all of these IG organizations. For our panel two witnesses, I'm interested in the manning, training, and equipping of your organizations. Do you have the personnel resources you need to effectively execute your missions? I'm also concerned about the results of the audits, evaluations, and investigations, and whether or not they are often focused on outputs or outcomes. I'd like to understand your thoughts on how we can change that. Again, thank you for your attendance. With that, Madam Chair, I yield back.
I thank the gentleman for his remarks. We'll now move to our first panel. Mr. Gordon Heddell, who is the former Inspector General of the Department of Defense, followed by Ms. Mandy Smithberger, Director for the Center for Defense Information Project on Government Oversight. Thank you both for being here today and for your participation. Mr. Heddell.
Chairwoman Spear, Ranking Member Banks, and esteemed members of the subcommittee, thank you for inviting me to testify today. I am disturbed by the independence or the lack of independence of our military component inspectors general and a command structure that has allowed harassment, assault, and a flagrant disregard by leadership for the Sexual Harassment Assault Response and Prevention Program known as SHARP. There is no place in the armed forces of the United States for bias, discrimination, harassment, assault, or retaliation. Simply stating that we have a zero-tolerance policy will not make it so. The core strength of our armed forces has always been in its leadership and the men and women who follow that leadership. Inequities, however, in the way our military handles harassment and assault investigations are gnawing away at the very fabric of that strength. While working with the TIGs, the Inspectors General of each of the military services, I found them to be men and women of very high character. I would be surprised if that were not still true today. Army Regulation, AR 20-1, the Inspector General Activities and Procedures Regulations, prescribes the responsibility and policy for the selection and duties of Inspectors General throughout the Army. It is, in effect, the Army IG's Bible. However, as I reviewed AR 20-1, I was surprised by statements in the regulation concerning the relationship that is supposed to exist between the commander and component IGs. Some examples. Component IGs only work for their commanders. They are the conscience of their commanders. They must understand the commander's personality. They must be the commander's confidant and serve as confidential advisor to the commander. They must work through the chain of command. There is nothing unusual or improper about a good relationship or respect for the chain of command. What concerns me, however, is that we are talking about the policies and procedures that govern military inspectors general, people who are supposed to be independent. The regulation appears to tacitly imply a reverence for the commander that is inappropriate for an inspector general. Pardon me. I believe there are things that the military services can learn from the Inspector General Act. There is no mention or requirement in the Act that the Inspector General be the Secretary's conscience, that the IG understand the Secretary's personality, or that the IG work through a chain of command. The IG Act does not mince words. It addresses the issue of independence head-on, stating that the head of the establishment shall not prevent or prohibit the Inspector General from completing any audit or investigation. The concept of independence is manifested throughout the IG Act. Lack of independence, or even a perceived lack of independence, is antithetical to congressional intent. I recommend to the military service departments that they, number one, require component IGs to promptly report particularly serious or flagrant problems, abuses, or deficiencies directly to the respective TIG. Number two, establish policy stating clearly that no one has the authority to alter IG reports. Number three, a Central Office of Inspector General Legal Counsel should be established for the purpose of providing dedicated legal services to support component IGs and no one else. Number four, component IGs must have timely access to all agency records. Number five, component IG assignments should not be considered collateral duty. The position of component IG as it stands now is not a career path, but a stopover on the way to something else. I recommend that component IG nominees successfully undergo training at an IG academy, a state-of-the-art academy, and when successfully completed, certified graduates be appointed to the rank of warrant officer. For the good order and discipline of our military services, I think the time is long overdue. We must provide state-of-the-art training and the appropriate tools to our component IGs. We must make harassment, assault, and retaliation things of the past. We must do this now, once and for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Heddell. Ms. Smithberger?
Thank you, Chairwoman Spear, Ranking Member Banks, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you again for inviting me to testify today. I want to thank the subcommittee for taking the time to look at whether our Inspector General system is meeting our country's needs. In particular, I'm very encouraged to hear that there's already going to be a focus on two important issues: protecting the independence of inspectors general and their investigations, and having meaningful protections for whistleblowers and survivors who come forward. As Mr. Heddell mentioned, our federal watchdogs perform an essential role in rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse. One of their most important responsibilities is their role investigating whistleblower reprisal complaints. However, POGO and government oversight entities have repeatedly raised concerns that the system for protecting military whistleblowers against retaliation is insufficient. The DOD IG system can seem unusually complex. The various roles of the service and the department and component IGs are complementary but slightly different. And to people who are turning to the IG system for help, those differences can be pretty confusing, particularly when they go to the DOD IG hotline. The DOD IG is a civilian statutory inspector general and is supposed to be independent from the department. I think there are a couple of things about those statutory IGs that we want to keep in mind for independence. They have subpoena powers, they have audit functions, and they are also uniquely dual-hatted, reporting both to Congress and to their agency head. In recent years, Congress has strengthened these IGs, most notably by providing each one with their own general counsel and requiring the president to provide congressional notification and justification for their removal and transfer. Service and component IGs have less independence, and when it comes to particularly sensitive investigations like a whistleblower reprisal complaint, we sometimes have concerns that that undermines their ability to effectively do their job. At the component IG level, a Department of Justice Inspector General review found that those offices often struggle to maintain adequate staff and experience because the offices compete for resources for military components engaged in military actions around the world. The same review found fully staffing field IG offices is a lower priority than staffing other service branch components. As Congresswoman Spear mentioned, in most cases, DOD IG hands retaliation allegations over to local or command IGs, who have the least amount of independence and experience in handling what are often highly complex investigations. We have worked with whistleblowers who have turned to that hotline only to be unpleasantly surprised that their complaint was referred to a service or component IG. Those referrals can feel like being thrown into the lion's den, including potentially exposing whistleblowers to additional retaliation. Despite a number of reforms, the outcomes for whistleblowers still look like a system unlikely to protect truth tellers. DOD IG semi-annual reports to Congress showed the vast majority of reprisal claims are not investigated, and only a handful of those investigated are substantiated. Even when reprisal claims are substantiated, those who retaliate are rarely punished. Remedies for whistleblowers are also elusive, with the vast majority waiting years for any remedy if they receive one at all. Most whistleblowers give up, or they end up fighting for years to get their own records corrected. I would be remiss to note that DOD IG has lacked a permanent leader for over 5 years. This fundamentally undermines the foundation of the department's Inspector General system. Not having a permanent leader, especially for a long period of time, compromises the office's credibility, its independence, its management, and its strategic direction. There are a number of other areas of oversights and reforms that can strengthen both the IG and whistleblower protection system. First, Congress must revise the burdens of proof for military whistleblowers. The odds are stacked against service member whistleblowers. For civilians, the burden of proof to show a personnel action was warranted and therefore not retaliatory rests on agency officials. For members of the military, the reverse is true, and service members must prove that they were illegally retaliated against by showing there was no other reasonable explanation for the adverse personnel action they experienced. Second, we urge the subcommittee to review whether service and component IGs have the legal support that they need. Third, Congress must look at or should consider expanding alternative dispute resolution options for the military to help provide expedient relief. Fourth, all IGs must do more outreach to the public and Congress about their work, including publishing their reports in a timely manner, proactively releasing information to the public that is going to be released anyway under a Freedom of Information Act request, and announcing upcoming projects that aren't law enforcement sensitive. Finally, I hope that service IGs will complete implementation of measures to protect the confidentiality of sources. We all count on inspectors general to warn commanders, senior leaders, Congress, and the public about problems. Their ability to do so depends on effectively working with whistleblowers. When individuals come forward, usually at great personal and professional risk, they must be effectively protected. The perceived and real failures of the system must be addressed. Thank you again, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Thank you both for your testimony. I would like to ask unanimous consent that non-subcommittee members be allowed to participate in today's briefing after all the subcommittee members have had an opportunity to ask questions. Is there any objection? Hearing none, so ordered. All right, so I am going to forego asking my questions until the end of the panel. So I offer Ranking Member Banks the opportunity now to pursue his questioning.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair, for that. As I mentioned in my opening statement, I'd like to understand from both of you whether you have any recommendations regarding how DOD and the services train and educate their IGs. Also, do you think they have what they need in terms of resources to execute their mission? Ms. Smithberger, we'll start with you.
Thank you for the question. I think I'm going to defer to Mr. Heddell a little bit more on some of the training, though. More training is always welcome, and I know DOD IG has been doing a lot to try and enhance that training. But I think something else to look at is for some of these investigations where independence is really important, for some of those investigations, I wonder in some of these cases if the DOD IG should be retaining more of those investigations than they are currently and giving DOD IG more of those resources. As you know, the problem with training, if people are circulating in and out of these service and component IGs, is that this is not going to be part of their long-term career field, and so there's diminishing returns. While if we have a civilian component that has this expertise, I think that's probably a better investment in the long term.
Mr. Heddell.
Turn your mic on, please. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. The Inspector General Act, I believe, is a really good, perhaps, role model for all IGs. And I think one of the huge concerns that I see is that the component IG skills and the way they do their work, well-meaning, I'm sure, in most respects, has not evolved over the years to be better than it could be. It has, where the inspectors general, the federal inspectors general, DOD IG, for instance, over the years, because of the wisdom of Congress, the initial IG Act of 1978 has been amended and improved and has made the Inspector General a stronger and more capable, a more talented and determined and an independent Inspector General. If that had not occurred, I would say that today that the DOD IG and other federal IGs would be impotent, and the whole concept of IG in federal government would be a failure. But it isn't a failure. Today our IGs are among the most skilled and exceptional executives in government. The same I cannot say is true in terms of our component IGs. They're basically passing through. They do a 36-month rotation into their assignments generally. In my opinion, it takes a lot longer than that to develop the kind of knowledge and commitment and the allegiance to what is right within the ranks of the military. And so just about the time that I think that they're really getting their sea legs, they're moving on to another non-IG assignment. One of the implications is that it reduces the number of mentors that would be around to be helpful. Number two, this idea of component IGs, several thousand, 2,000 or 3,000 of them, it needs to become a profession. It's not, in my opinion, viewed as a profession. There needs to be a very sophisticated, state-of-the-art training academy. And I believe that individuals who are nominated to become component inspectors general should go through the academy. They should be required to pass and then certified. And once they're certified, I believe that they should be appointed to the rank of warrant officer. I have nothing against non-commissioned officers. They're the backbone of our military in many, many ways. But as an inspector general, I think we have to start at a higher level, and we have to work from there. It has to become a profession. The biggest issue facing the component IGs is independence. We have to give these component IGs the backbone and the confidence to do their work and not worry about what their commander says. I really believe that there's too much emphasis on the chain of command, that the component IG is required to go through his or her commander. Now, I have great respect, having been in the military, for the chain of command, but it doesn't work, in my opinion, when it comes to inspectors general. Their chain of command must be directly from them to the respective TIG. Now, that would cause a lot of headaches under the structure today for the TIGs to take that kind of, intimate control of the situation, but I think that's necessary. We've reached a point with respect to assault, harassment, retaliation. All of these things are undermining. When I was in the military, and I'm sure it's true today, the central thought among rank and file members is that the military takes care of its own. Well, I'm sure they still believe in that, and I'm sure to a great extent they do. But that's not happening. There are too many people left behind.
A lot of really great comments, and with that, Madam Chair, I'm going to yield back.
All right, thank you. I think what we're going to do now is recess for about, I'm sorry, we're not going to recess, we're going to suspend for about, I guess, 20 minutes. Actually, wait a minute. Maybe what we'll do is go to Ms. Escobar for 5 minutes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Heddell, I want to pick up where you just left off because I'm very curious about where you were headed with your comments with regard to the challenges around chain of command, trying to remove oneself from conflict of interest, and the added challenge with the component IGs that rotate out. What do you think, if you had to re-envision the component IGs, and actually this is a question for both of our panelists, if you had to re-envision this, what would the best practices be, and what would it look like?
You know, I think a very good, I'm speaking as a former Army aviator, and so I sort of use that as my role model here, in that training is what's going to make inspectors general at the component level really competent and dedicated and able, and who buy in to the concept that everyone deserves protection. When they can't get it, it undermines the order and discipline of the military. And that's not happening. So training is the first thing. And I think there needs to be an academy, a real, true-to-life academy that is focused entirely on inspectors general at the component level. And they need to be, those nominees that go to that academy need to pass the course and be certified. If they're not certified, they don't become inspectors general. If they are certified, as I said earlier, I think they should be appointed warrant officer rank. It's a professional rank, and I think it raises the whole idea of inspectors general at the component level to a profession. And rotating people out after 36 months to something that's not related, they have no commitment. And frankly, I do think that when they know they're going to be rotated out to a non-IG position, they may be thinking about, how am I going to be received when I go to the non-IG world? I think we have to remove any concerns that an IG might have that somehow they're going to be treated differently because they were an IG. The other thing is the chain of command. There is far too much emphasis in the Army Regulation 20-1 for the reverence that a component IG must show to the commander. There are too many approvals that the commander must provide that really it should be the TIGs providing. An example, if a component IG is sees that he's got a criminal investigation on his hands, but of course he or she does not have the law enforcement authority to conduct that criminal investigation, they're required to go to their commander, and then it's up to the commander to decide whether to ask, in the Army's case, the CID to open an investigation. They may or they may not, depending on the facts, but the component IG is really, he's dependent on what that decision is. I think that decision, when it comes to criminal investigation, should be made with the TIG. The other thing, I think there's a real problem with respect to legal counsel. The TIGs have their own legal counsel, I believe, but the component IGs have to submit a request for advice, and they don't know what kind of a lawyer or attorney they're going to get. And they don't know whether that attorney, whether his or her loyalties go to the commander or to someone else. We need a commitment that component IGs have a committed legal counsel that will support them. These are the kinds of things that will create independence on the part of the IG. It'll create confidence, and it'll create confidence by the people that are retaliated against, who are harassed, who are assaulted. Because right now, if I'm a person that is a victim of harassment and I read AR-20, I'd have to really think twice before I would go to the component IG. It's
Mr. Heddell, I'm so sorry, we are out of time. Thank you for your response. Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Escobar. We will now suspend for 20 minutes and return. Again, our apologies. This is the nature of our vote today. We will reconvene then in 20 minutes. Thank you.